Welcome to the 2021-2023 Grow Your Own Grant Program Overview webinar. This is the first and only recording, an informational webinar that will cover each component of the Grow Your Own Grant application. This video will cover motivation and purpose of this grant opportunity. This includes the background information and rationale for the program, an overview of the grant components, information regarding application eligibility, timelines, process, and requirements. And finally, links to additional information and resources to support your completion of the application. We recommend viewing this webinar while referencing both the program guidelines and the application documents. The program guidelines document, commonly referred to as the RFA, will be your most comprehensive guide to much of the content outlined in the application webinar. Motivation and purpose. The 2021-2023 Grow Your Own Grant has been designed to elevate the teaching profession in Texas and facilitate increased entry of qualified, diverse candidates into the teaching profession, particularly in rural and small school settings. This grant aligns with the Texas Education Agency's #1 strategic priority, which is to recruit, support, and retain teachers and principals. For the purpose of this grant, a small school is designated by LEA student enrollment. The intention of the grant program is to address several challenges Texas currently faces in terms of recruiting candidates to the field, such as teacher shortages in traditionally hard-to-staff areas, particularly in rural regions throughout the state, and bilingual and special education certification areas. Demographic gaps between students and teachers, and a declining perception of the teaching profession, as demonstrated by the stated lack of desire of high school students to pursue teaching as a profession. Research demonstrates that these challenges can be effectively addressed by local education agencies, in partnership with institutions of higher education, through a number of Grow Your Own approaches. The 2021-2023 Grow Your Own Grant program offers two approaches or two pathways. The program aims to elevate the perception of the teaching profession through the development and facilitation of high-quality education and training courses at the high school level, Pathway 1. And Pathway 2, supporting certification completion for paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitutes in hard-to-staff areas. Similar to principal residency, the goals of Grow Your Own are diversity, quality, and sustainability after the grant period. All three of these at scale. The two pathways allow for three approaches for this grant to allow opportunities for districts to grow their own educators along the teacher pipeline. The pipeline includes entry points for high school students, paraprofessionals, and certified teachers. Pathway 1 focuses on high school students and certified teachers. It offers a stipend to teachers who will teach and support education and training courses throughout the year. It also provides additional funding to establish or grow CTE education and training programs for high school students to complete, and to grow dual credit programs in education and training. Pathway 2 offers a stipend to help transition paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers to full-time teaching roles. Overviews of Pathway 1 and 2. Pathway 1 offers funds to support educators in establishing, implementing, and enhancing CTE education and training courses with dual credit options in their school districts. The ultimate outcome of this pathway is to increase high school students' exposure to the teaching profession, particularly students in rural communities and diverse students early in their career planning process. We expect student participation in the education and training courses will create a positive perception of the profession and greater investment long term. In addition, we offered as dual credit the education and training courses provide a greater incentive for students to persist in pursuing education as a career. In fact, the teachers who serve as teachers of record in education and training courses are hugely influential mentors to students interested in exploring teaching. One key thing to remember is that every single LEA in the state and any ESC that acts as a fiscal agent for LEAs are eligible to apply for this grant. I'll say that again. One key thing to remember is that every single LEA in the state and any ESC that acts as a fiscal agent for LEAs are eligible to apply for this grant. To implement a Pathway 1 program, students need to be able to enroll in education and training courses at the high school level. Pathway 1 also provides support for education and training program implementation, targeting strong teachers with a passion for motivating students to enter the teaching profession. It offers stipends to support educators in establishing, implementing, and enhancing the CTE education and training programs with dual credit opportunities in their schools. Additional and more specific criteria of who is eligible to participate is listed on pages 9 and 10 of the RFA guidelines. Remember, candidates cannot be employees new to the LEA in the 2020-21 school year. Pathway 1 does offer two funding options. Applicants can request up to $5,500 for teachers who are or will be teaching a non-dual credit education and training course. This must be principles of education and training, instructional practices, and or practicum in education and training. $5,000 should go directly to the teacher as a stipend of $2,500 per year to be used at the teacher's discretion. This stipend is a bonus to their payroll and can be used however they decide. The remaining funds of $500 or $250 per year can be used for administrative and indirect costs. Applicants can also request up to $11,000 per teacher who will be teaching an education and training course for dual credit. This must be instructional practices and or practicum in education and training. This individual must hold a master's degree with 18 credit hours in education as of the start of the 2020-2021 school year. Since this is a requirement for the dual credit instructor, $10,000 should go directly to the teacher as a stipend of $5,000 per year to be used at the teacher's discretion. This stipend is a bonus to their payroll and can be used however they decide. So if the teacher would like to use the funds toward an additional advanced degree or certification, they can. But it is ultimately the teacher's decision to use the funds however they would like. This is not a tuition award for a teacher to earn a master's degree. The remaining $1,000 or $500 per year can be used for administrative and indirect costs. The total number of participants per LEA, 10, with a limit of 2 Pathway 1 stipend recipients per high school. For this pathway, LEAs are eligible to apply on their own or as a fiscal agent of a shared service agreement, and ESCs are eligible to apply as fiscal agent of a shared service agreement. This is inclusive of previous awardees in Cycle 1, Cycle 2, and Cycle 3. However, the teachers receiving the stipend may not be the same teachers. For this pathway, eligible applicants, the entities who will complete and submit a grant application, include any LEA and any ESC of size or type. ESCs can only serve as the fiscal agent of a shared service agreement for LEAs. Eligible candidates, the individuals receiving the stipend, include teachers who currently serve as or will serve as the teacher of record for the 3 education and training courses listed in the RFA. This stipend may be awarded to a teacher who is new to teaching the education and training courses on a campus and also to teachers who have been and currently are teaching education and training courses on a campus. Please see pages 9 and 10 of the RFA program guidelines for additional eligibility requirements for selected candidates. Remember, you will report these individuals to TEA, so they must meet the listed requirements. In addition to teacher stipends, there is an additional one-time payment of $8,000 or $10,000 available for each school in the participating LEA. Each high school within the LEA is required to implement a Grow Your Own education and training program and will receive these additional funds to support this. Therefore, funds cannot be concentrated on one high school or CTE center within an LEA that has several high school campuses. All LEA high schools must participate, and there is no limit to the number of high school campuses that receive funds. Again, there are 3 courses this grant addresses: Principles of Education and Training, Instructional Practices, and Practicum in Education and Training. All high schools should offer at least one of these 3 courses in the first grant year, and at least 2 of these courses in the second grant year. All campuses must also participate in a chapter of TAFE or FCCLA. Teachers and students of the education and training courses must compete in at least one event per school year. To support these activities, we have identified 3 types of high schools. High schools that are planning to implement a dual credit education and training program can be allocated $10,000. High schools without dual credit plans that also do not have existing education and training courses will be allocated $10,000. And high schools without dual credit plans that do have education and training courses will be allocated $8,000. Do not double dip funding amounts here. High schools may not be allocated $18,000 or $20,000. For example, a high school with plans to offer the dual credit education and training courses get $10,000 regardless of current course offerings. Of this allocation, up to $3,000 can cover travel to the TEA-led Teacher Institute that will be held in Austin or virtually at the end of June 2021. The remaining funds can be used to support the implementation and growth of the education and training program and organization. The RFA program guidelines document has a complete list of allowable use of these funds. Feel free to pause this webinar while you look at the program guidelines and your application documents. We have the required implementers that we just spoke about, the required schools, the number of schools, and the funding based on education and training program status currently. Switching over to the Pathway 2 goals, Pathway 2 offers stipends to transition paraprofessionals, teachers' aides, and substitutes to teaching roles. The ultimate outcome of this pathway is to increase staff employed in the district who work towards the role of classroom teacher. For this pathway, candidates that may receive stipends are paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitutes. Teachers that are under DOI, not holding a certificate, but having a 4-year university degree, would be eligible for Pathway 2A, and teachers that are under DUI without a cert or degree would be eligible for Pathway 2B. Additional and more specific criteria of who is eligible to participate is listed on page 10 of the RFA program guidelines. Remember, candidates cannot be new employees to the LEA in 2020-2021, and also cannot be staff that already received grant funds in Cycle 1 or Cycle 2. Pathway 2 does offer 2 types of award amounts. Applicants may request up to $5,500 per candidate pursuing only a teacher certification in a high-need area, such as one identified in your needs assessment. 5,000 of this should be used toward gaining a teacher certification. The remaining 500 can be used for administrative and/or indirect costs. Applicants may also request up to 19,000 per candidate who will complete a bachelor's degree and certification program. 18,000 of this should be used towards obtainment of the degree, certification, and/or living stipend for the candidate. The remaining funds of $1,000 can be used for administrative and/or direct costs. In order to participate, these candidates must already have at least 75 college credit hours complete by May 15th, 2021. The maximum number of participants for any application is 10 participants per LEA. Therefore, if an applicant is adding Pathway 2 to their Pathway 1 application, the maximum is still 10 as a combined total between Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. That means the maximum for Pathway 2 by this year's guidelines can be no more than 6. So some applying districts will not be able to reach that maximum number of 10 unless you have 4 candidates in Pathway 1. Again, this is a change from last year. The maximum candidates per application is 6 for Pathway 2. All applicant eligibility rules for Pathway 1 also apply to Pathway 2. These are covered in the Pathway 1 section of this webinar. Every LEA that elects to apply for Pathway 2 must also be participating in Pathway 1, even LEAs within shared service agreements. Finally, each applicant that has candidates pursuing a certification only, we call these Pathway 2A candidates, should be obtaining their certification through the same partner EPP as a cohort. The application is responsible for setting up an MOU between the LEA and this one EPP. Again, this page shows the new funding amounts for Pathway 2 candidates. $8,000 per candidate pursuing teacher-only certification, $7,500 of that going directly to the candidate, and $19,000 per candidate pursuing a bachelor's degree and teaching certification. $18,000 of that going directly to the candidate. As a quick recap, Pathway 1 offers stipends to support educators in establishing or growing education and training programs within the LEA. It offers an additional amount to support program implementation. Pathway 2 offers stipends to transition paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitutes to full-time teaching roles. This pathway is only an add-on to Pathway 1. Pathway 2 cannot exist by itself. Timeline for implementation. Let's first review the timeline for all education and training programs. All high schools must develop a plan for education and training courses in the 2021 school year, considering master scheduling, student recruitment, and other long-term planning. In the 21-22 school year, campuses must offer and candidates must teach at least one of the following courses: Principles of Education and Training, Instructional Practices, and/or Practicum in Education. All high schools must also have a chapter of TAFE or FCCLA with students in at least one competitive event. In the 22-23 school year, candidates must continue to teach at least one of the 3 named education and training courses. However, each high school in the LEA must now offer at least two of the courses, with continuing to participate in TAFE or FCCLA. Now let's add on to the timeline additional activities for campuses offering dual credit with Pathway 1B teacher candidates. In 2021, schools with a dual credit teacher need to establish partnership with an IHE to establish dual credit offerings for the following year. They must teach at least one education and training course for dual credit in 21-22 and two sections for dual credit in 22-23. To clarify, campuses with dual credit also need to have CTSOs, meaning you must participate in FCCLA or TAFE in dual credit. In 2020-2021, LEA should establish a partnership with a single high-quality EPP for candidate certification and support, and formalize this with an MOU. This MOU will be submitted to TEA after award selection. Let's review the timeline for Pathway 2A first. This applies to candidates that already have a bachelor's degree and will be earning a teaching certificate using their $5,000 allocation. These candidates should enroll in the partner EPP designated by the LEA in the 2020-2021 school year. Within the first year of the grant, by the end of the 21-22 school year, these candidates should complete the EPP program and be awarded a certificate. Pathway 2A candidates should be serving as teachers of record within the LEA beginning in the fall of 2022 for the 22-23 school year. Now let's review the timeline for our Pathway 2B candidates. This applies to candidates that have at least 75 college credit hours and will be completing a bachelor's degree and earning a certification. In the 2021-2022 school year, these candidates should be continuing their degree coursework within the university of their choosing. Some may graduate with a bachelor's degree in year one of the grant. In the second year of the grant, these candidates should graduate with a bachelor's degree, enroll in or continue and compete in EPP, and be awarded a teacher certification. Pathway 2B candidates should be serving as teachers of record within the LEA beginning in the fall of 2023 for the 23-24 school year. All of these details are also outlined on page 16 of the RFA guidelines. Moving on to eligibility information. Who is eligible to apply for this grant? Any LEA or ESC is eligible for Pathways 1 and 2. An applicant is eligible even if it has previously been awarded a grant in Cycle 1, Cycle 2, or Cycle 3. Applicants are also eligible if they have not previously applied for Cycles 1, 2, or 3. Each applicant may only submit one grant application. LEAs and ESCs may apply individually or as part of a shared service agreement, SSA, for Pathways 1 and 2, but not both. Another key point to note is that regardless of the pathway chosen, an applicant may request a maximum of $499,999. Application timeline. Now that you have an understanding of the two Grow Your Own pathways, eligibility, and timelines, we would like to recommend a process for completing the application. First, watch the remainder of this webinar that contains further details for the pathway to which you intend to apply. Then, Read through the RFA program guidelines, located on the Grants Opportunity page. The program guidelines provide in-depth information about each component of the 2021 to 2023 Grow Your Own grant program for Cycle 4. Start here to develop a clear understanding of the grant structures and expectations. Next, review any supplemental resources provided by TEA on the Grants Opportunities page. These resources provide relevant research, background information, and best practices aligned to the Grow Your Own initiative. These are excellent resources to reference when developing your own Grow Your Own plan. Then, read through the general and fiscal guidelines. This document provides an overview of the application process and a detailed description of specific components of the application. Finally, read through and complete the application and required attachments for your selected pathway. Please don't forget to complete the attachment for your selected pathway, which must be submitted with the application in order to be considered for a grant award. The attachments can also be accessed via the Grants Opportunities page. Application requirements. A Grow Your Own application consists of two parts: an application and the corresponding required attachment. The application provides the applicant the opportunity to share their need, plan, and goal in alignment with the goals of the grant. The attachments provide the applicant the opportunity to share more in-depth plans for how they plan to address specific requirements aligned with their chosen pathway. The Grow Your Own application is considered complete when both the completed application and the corresponding required attachment are submitted. You will either be submitting the attachment for Pathway 1 with an optional section for applications adding Pathway 2. There is just one attachment. You will figure out how much of that attachment you fill out. Both must be submitted to be considered complete. Now, let's move on to the application requirements in this section. You will find helpful considerations for completing the application and the attachment sections for Pathway 1 requests. As a reminder, applicants must complete all sections of the grant application, as well as the required Pathway 1 attachment for your application to be deemed complete. We recommend watching the remainder of this video with the application and attachment available for reference. Pathway 2 is an add-on to Pathway 1. For this section, the focus will be in additional consideration for Pathway 2 candidates. Generally, when completing an application that covers both pathways, be sure that your response to each section of the application addresses both your Pathway 1 program and your Pathway 2 program. If applicants do not provide this information, it may impact their scoring. Again, we recommend watching the remainder of this video with the application and the attachment available for reference. Completing the application. In order to access the grant resources, application, and attachments, please go to the TEA Grants Opportunities page. Use the drop-down menu to select the 21-23 Grow Your Own Grant Program Cycle 4 option, and submit your application via mail with the application form and attachment to the address indicated on the application. The first section of the application is the needs assessment. On page 2, the applicant should identify 3 quantifiable needs as addressed in your needs assessment. The program funds will address this need and describe your plan for addressing those needs. First, this question requires that each applicant conduct a comprehensive needs assessment in alignment with the purpose of the Grow Your Own grant. Recall that the goals of the grant are to elevate the perception of the teaching profession, address teacher shortages, and increase the quality, diversity, and scale of the teacher workforce. The outcome of the comprehensive needs assessment process. 3 identified needs will then be included in the application. When conducting the needs assessment, some data sources to consider might include the number of teacher vacancies, the number of applications per teacher vacancy, and the diversity of the LEA/campus teaching staff in comparison to the diversity of the LEA/campus student population. For additional information about conducting a comprehensive needs assessment, please reference page 40 of the General and Fiscal Guidelines. The applicant should articulate a plan to directly address each of the identified needs in alignment with a Pathway 1 program. This section is worth 10 application points. Remember to conduct the comprehensive needs assessment around both Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. When conducting the comprehensive needs assessment in alignment with the Grow Your Own Pathway 2 intended outcomes, some data sources to consider include number of teacher vacancies and applications per vacancy, the diversity of the LEA campus teaching staff in comparison to the diversity of the student population, and other local needs such as bilingual and special education staffing shortages. When you describe the plans to address these needs, include strategies aligned to the Pathway 2 program in addition to the Pathway 1 program. Next, the application asks the applicant to identify a SMART goal consistent with the purpose of the grant and 3 benchmarks for progress and implementation of the grant. This is on pages 2 and 3 of the application document. The SMART goal should align with the purpose of the grant, growing and recruiting qualified, diverse teachers to the field. For addition, regarding the development of SMART goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, please reference page 42 on the General and Fiscal Guidelines. Benchmarks are measurable, short-term goals that indicate progress towards the SMART goal. For the purpose of the Grow Your Own grant, strong benchmarks would align to specific performance measures addressed in pages 24 and 25 of the RFA program guidelines. For instance, a specific performance measure would be the number of students enrolled in the education and training courses on each high school campus per grade level each semester. This section is worth 10 total points on the application. The next section asks applicants to address how they will use the required collection of program evaluation data to make adjustments and modify their programs to ensure that they reach their benchmarks and SMART goals. For additional information on project evaluation and modification, see data collection requirements on pages 24 and 25 of the RFA program guidelines. When developing the plan, take into consideration the process you will use to collect the required data and the process you will implement to make adjustments to the plan as necessary. This section of the application is worth 5 points. The next section, on page 3, asks applicants to address how they will use the required collection of program evaluation data to make adjustments and modify their programs to ensure that they reach their benchmarks and SMART goals. Make sure this section also addresses both Pathways 2 and Pathway 1. The next section of the application are the statutory and program requirements. There are 5 program requirements total on pages 5, 6, and 7 of the application document. This first program requirement asks for applicants to describe the sustainability plan that addresses how the education and training program, Pathway 1, includes courses and the CTSO. also including plans to grow and continue beyond the timeline of the grant funding. The plan should begin with action steps taken in the first year of the grant funding and demonstrate ability to leverage and coordinate resources that increase the capacity of the LEA to strengthen the local student to teacher pipeline and make progress on local sustainability. This may include the use of other state and federal resources, as well as local resources such as an advisory board, middle school involvement, post-secondary partnerships, guaranteed interviews for returning students, etc. This question is worth 5 points. When you respond to the first program requirement, be sure the sustainability plan also addresses Pathway 2, specifically a pipeline from support staff to teaching staff. The second program requirement asks for applicants to describe the plan to recruit teachers to the program. The plan must incorporate research-based best practices in equitable recruitment. Which teachers have measurable student achievement and the ability to motivate students to pursue teaching? How will you generate interest among diverse, high-performing, and highly motivating teachers? This question is worth 5 points. When you respond to the second program requirement, be sure to also include the plan to recruit paraprofessionals, instructional aides, and long-term substitute teachers who will earn a bachelor's degree and/or teaching certificate. Does the plan to recruit participants who are interested and eligible in participating in the program? Which staff have strong indicators, including involvement in school activities and high evaluation ratings? How will you generate interest among diverse and high-performing staff? How will your recruitment strategy incorporate considerations of diversity and/or hard-to-staff areas? The third program requirement asks for applicants to describe how the LEA will equitably select quality, diverse candidates from the pool of eligible candidates to teach education and training courses. The type of information we are looking for in this section includes the use of any interview questions, assessment of persistence, recommendations, rubrics, consideration of hard-to-staff areas, or other tools using research-based equitable best practices. It is also important that you make a link to your needs assessment here regarding your choice of teachers to participate. For example, if you have a history of difficulty in staffing math positions, consider choosing a strong math teacher to receive the stipend and teach the education and training course. Consider your process for selecting the teachers that are best suited for the position. This question is worth 5 points. The third program requirement also asks for applicants to describe how the LEA will equitably select diverse candidates from the pool of eligible candidates to become certified teachers. In this section, add your response from Pathway 1 to include specifics for Pathway 2. The fourth program requirement asks applicants to describe how the LEA will support the selected education and training course teachers that will be receiving stipends. We recommend that you name specific supports for potential career pathways, resource supports, and personnel supports. For example, what professional development can the LEA provide for the teacher? What instructional resources and best practices can the LEA use as supports? What leadership and counseling staff will be leveraged to share responsibility for the education and training program? The fourth program requirement asks applicants to describe how the LEA will support the selected candidates that will be receiving the stipend to complete their bachelor's degree and/or earning their teaching certificate. We recommend that you name specific supports for Pathway 2 candidates to add to your response. For example, what additional professional development can the LEA provide for these candidates? How can paid release time and flexible teaching schedules help Pathway 2 candidates stay on track towards certification? Program Requirement 5 asks the applicant to describe the MOU in which the selected candidates commit to remain in the LEA for an agreed upon length of time as a condition of receiving the stipend, and the LEA commits to retaining candidates with satisfactory program completion. Be sure the answer for this question contains both Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 candidates in your application document. Following the statutory and program requirements, there is a section to request funds and offer a budget summary on page 9 of the application document. This slide shows an overview of what to budget, while the application requests that you enter line items into the appropriate cost category. Cost categories are payroll costs, professional and contracted services, supplies and materials, other operating expenses. In the example here, for a total of 6 of the maximum of 10 candidates between Pathway 1 and 2, for the budget summary, you will need to list all of the allowable grant-related activities for which you are requesting grant funds. Please note, administrative costs can be no more than 10% of the total stipend amount awarded. This includes both direct administrative and allowable indirect costs. Additional requests for administrative or indirect costs on top of what is already built into the formula is also not allowed. The total amount requested should be equal to the amount on page 8, inclusive of indirect costs. Please take care in completing your budget within allowable parameters. This accounts for 10 points in the application. For a complete list of allowable costs, please refer to pages 22, 23, and 24 of the RFA Program Guidelines document. Similar to Pathway 1, be sure to include how much you are requesting for Pathway 2, and be sure to break down the costs in the budget summary. Remember, the application requests that you enter line items into the appropriate cost category. Unlike what you see here, cost categories are payroll costs, professional and contracted services, supplies and materials, other operating costs. In the example here, for a maximum of 6 candidates to complete the 10, Pathway 2 this year is capped at a maximum of 6, even if you don't have 4 teachers participating in Pathway 2. Moving back to the previous page, you will see that there are 4 teachers and 4 different schools involved in this sample application. The top 2 twos indicate 2 teachers at each pathway, 1A and 1B, and there being 2 high schools with existing education and training programs receiving $8,000 each, and 2 high schools without those existing education and training courses, making $10,000 each on the grant application. And then 2 of those 4 high schools also are offering dual credit for an additional $10,000. Because there are 4 teachers, 4 candidates in Pathway 1, and a maximum of 10 total on an application, 6 is the total that this application can have for Pathway 2, and 6 is also the maximum for Pathway 2 candidates, regardless of how many teachers you have in Pathway 1. On this sample application, 2 Pathway 2A candidates are pursuing a teaching certification only, receiving $8,000 on the application each, and 4 Pathway 2B candidates pursuing both a bachelor's degree and a teaching certification, receiving $19,000 each on the application. Out of that $8,000, $7,500 goes to the candidate, and $500 goes to indirect and administrative costs. Out of the $19,000, $18,000 goes to the candidate, and $1,000 goes to the LEA applicant for administrative and indirect costs. Following the statutory and program requirements, this section where you request for grant funds and offer a budget summary on page 9 of the application document, this slide shows a sample overview of part of what to budget on payroll costs. Stipends for 1A, stipends for 1B, stipends for 2A, and stipends for 2B. Feel free to pause this part of the application and look at your application to view the webinar screen and your application simultaneously. Again, indirect costs are $500 for the $5,000 grants, $500 for the $8,000 grants, and $1,000 for the $19,000 grants. You'll see on the payroll costs here, we have already deducted $500 from Pathway 1 stipends. You've deducted $1,000 from Pathway 1B stipends. You've deducted $500 from Pathway 2A stipends, and you've deducted $1,000 from Pathway 2B stipends. The additional indirect costs, the deductions we just spoke about, will be placed later on in the request for grant funds, not in the payroll. Other operating costs that exist with the request for grant funds are high schools with existing education and training courses, high schools with new education and training courses, and high schools with dual credit education and training courses. The program budget summary on this page shows specifically the deductions that were taken out for indirect cost calculations. Those will be placed at the bottom of the page, directly above the total grant award requested. As you'll see, the $1,000 that was taken out for the 2 participants of Pathway 1A, $2,000 was taken out for the 2 participants for Pathway 1B, $1,000 was taken out for the 2 participants of Pathway 2A, and $4,000 was taken out for the Pathway 2B participants, for a total of $8,000 indirect and administrative costs. Proofread your scoring. There are 105 possible points that you can receive for this Grow Your Own grant. Added this year. The points are broken down into 6 categories. You may have caught this during the webinar. The standard review criteria, which is used to score all state competitive grants, program budget is worth 60 points. If you notice, the specific review criteria, which has been added for the Grow Your Own grant, is worth 20 points. These will be assigned based on the quality of responses to questions asked on the attached document. So highlighted in the red box, priority points based on student enrollment are awarded up to 10 points. Accounted for. Remember, LEAs of any size or type are eligible to apply. These are just additional points awarded based on the number of students enrolled, such that LEAs serving fewer students get more points. So to align to the overall grant goal of addressing challenges faced by small and education and training courses in 2021. For an applicant representing multiple LEAs, these priority points will be awarded on the basis of average student enrollment among all of the participating LEAs. Count those high schools. Just as a side note, there are no priority points for LEA type. So what we have to do priority points based on letters of support received from LEA school or governing boards make up to 5 points. For SSA applicants, we have to remove these points are based on the percentage of letters of support received from the local school or governing board. Try to submit a letter for each LEA included in the application. 5. In Cycle 4, each applicant also has the opportunity to access an additional 10 priority points. For LEA and ESC applicants of the pathways 1 and 2, up to 10 points may be awarded for campuses implementing a career and college readiness school model that offers an education and training pathway leading to an Associate of Art in Teaching. Make sure to attach evidence of this to your application. And 6, new this year for Cycle 4, priority points will be awarded to districts flagged for equity plans. When you go to place each high school as an other operating completing the attachments cost, we would then do the same thing. For Pathway 1,
take out
in addition to
this
the application,
8,000 times
there's
2
an
equals
attachment that needs
16,000.
to be completed and submitted in order for your
Total
application
for
to be deemed
operating
complete.
the 4 schools
The attachment can be found on the
is
Grants
56,000.
Opportunities page after
We've
searching
now
for Grow
taken
Your
out
Own.
the double count.
There are 2
it's
questions
now
on the
40,000
attachment that are relevant to Pathway 1
2
program
and
design.
2, both at the 10.
The first is requesting details on the implementation and growth of the education and training courses. This includes who will be recruited to the program, when and how marketing will occur, how counseling and leadership staff will be involved, and more. Be sure to be as specific as possible in this section, following both the guidance on the RFA document and the attachment itself. Things to consider include: how will you build a comprehensive plan that aligns to the grant goals and local staffing needs? How will participation in TAFE and FCCLA supplement the skills students learn in the courses? And how will you plan for the program and enrollment to grow and improve each year? Remember, dual credit applicants must submit an MOU with their application between the LEA and the IHE that will sponsor the dual credit opportunity. The program attachment accounts for 20 application points. Finally, if the applicant is a fiscal agent on behalf of the SSA, it must submit a list of participating LEAs. Things to consider here: what steps will you take to identify and pursue a dual credit partner? What added value will this partnership have for students and their persistence? In addition to the grant application, all applicants are also required to complete a Grow Your Own program attachment for the related pathway for Pathway 2. The Pathway 2 selection has only one question asking applicants to describe the plan to develop a partnership between a high-quality EPP and the LEA. Things to consider include selecting an EPP that meets the needs of your candidate, or how the LEA intends to ensure a quality training experience for all candidates. Your plan here must include job-embedded training, flexibility of training location and schedule, a cohort approach, and consistent supports that encourage persistence and sustainability. Eligible partner EPPs are those with accredited non-rated, and accredited WARN designations only. The plan should include all Pathway 2A certification-only candidates being certified by a single partner LEA as a cohort. Additional funding examples. Let's take a look at an example funding request for Pathway 1. In this scenario, the district has 5 high schools, 2 of which offer education and training courses, and 2 of which have plans to offer dual credit education and training programs with the support of this grant. That leaves 1 high school without existing courses and without plans for dual credit. The LEA is requesting funding for 10 teachers, 2 from each school. 4 of these teachers have master's degrees and will be teaching the education and training course for dual credit. Remember to only count each high school 1 time. There are 5 categories that need to be counted and calculated on page 8 of the application document. The number of teachers teaching a dual credit education and training course, 4. The number of teachers teaching a non-dual credit education and training course, 6. The number of high schools with existing education and training courses and will not be offering dual credit through the grant. The number of high schools without an existing education and training course and will not be offering dual credit through the grant. The number of high schools that will be offering dual credit through the grant regardless of previous course offerings. It is very important to only count each high school 1 time. High schools may only be allocated 8,000 or 10,000, but not both. Based on this scenario, this LEA would request $123,000 for Pathway 1. Of the $123,000, $7,000 may be used for administrative and allowable indirect costs. This cost is accounted for by $1,000 per dual credit teacher and $500 per non-dual credit teacher. Funds for the education and training course implementation may not be used for administrative or indirect costs. Additional requests for administrative or indirect costs on top of what is already built into the formula is not allowable. So if you are an ESC, you would do this for each LEA and sum all the totals to get the total request for Pathway 1. For more examples of Pathway 1 funding scenarios, please refer to pages 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the RFA program guidelines. Let's take a look at an example funding request for Pathway 2 because Pathway 2 is an add-on to Pathway 1. We'll use the scenario from the Pathway 1 video. This same LEA is requesting funding for 6 paraprofessionals to become full-time teachers. 4 of them only need to get their teaching certification, and 2 of them need to obtain a bachelor's degree and teaching certification. For Pathway 2, there are 2 categories that need to be counted and calculated. Number of candidates pursuing a teaching certification only, in this example 4, and number of candidates pursuing both a bachelor's degree and a teaching certificate, in this example 2. Based on the scenario, this LEA would request $70,000 for Pathway 2. You might recall the requested funds for Pathway 1 totaled $123,000. Adding the total request of Pathway 1 and Pathway 2, this LEA would now request $193,000. If you are applying as the fiscal agent of an SSA, you would do this for each LEA and sum all of the totals to get the total request for Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. Please note that each participating LEA that elects to pursue Pathway 2 must also participate in Pathway 1. This means that an SSA will not include any LEAs that are only participating in Pathway 2. Remember, additional requests for administrative or indirect costs on top of what is already built into this formula is also not allowable. For more examples of Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 funding scenarios, please refer to pages 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the RFA program guidelines. Supplemental resources. For the 21-2023 Grow Your Own Grant Opportunities page, we have also provided additional resources for your reference, as mentioned previously. The intention of providing these resources is to share additional background information, research, and best practices which applicants may use to inform the design of their program. FAQ section. Can we apply if we already have received the grant? Yes. For the priority points awarded to programs in rural schools, must the school be in the primary fiscal agent district, or can they be a member of a shared service agreement with other LEAs and an urban district serving as a lead district for the application to be eligible for the priority points? Priority points are awarded to applicants based on LEA enrollment and not LEA type or designation. To determine priority points for applications with a fiscal agent representing more than one LEA, the points are calculated based on the average LEA enrollment of all participating districts. Are teachers that are under District of Innovation, DOI, eligible for Pathway 2? Teachers that are under DOI not holding a certificate but have a 4-year university degree would be eligible for Pathway 2A. And teachers that are under DOI without a cert or 4-year university degree would be eligible for Pathway 2B. So yes, eligibility does include District of Innovation eligible candidates. Are middle schools eligible to receive the grant? No. Districts and charter networks without a high school cannot apply for the Grow Your Own grant. We are currently a K-8 school district. We are moving to a high school over the next 4 years. We will have our first freshman class during the 2021-2022 school year. Are we eligible for the 21-23 Grow Your Own grant program for Cycle 4? Yes. High school freshmen are eligible to enroll in Principles of Education and Training, which is one of the 3 required courses for Pathway 1A. This district is eligible to apply for Pathway 1. The campus will need to add the Instructional Practices course for the 22-23 school year. The guidance handbook references the grant is intended for smaller rural districts. Is that just a general statement, or does your district have to meet a predetermined status or criteria? If so, where is that criteria or eligibility list? There are no predetermined criteria. All districts with high schools are eligible. Priority points will be given based on the LEA's size, not designation. Questions? As you review the additional information in this webinar, in the RFA program guidelines, and in the application attachments, please reach out to GYO grant at tea.texas.gov with questions. We will compile these questions and address them in a frequently asked questions document. The deadline to submit questions is September 30th, 2020. The frequently asked questions document will be posted to the Grow Your Own Grant Opportunities page on October 5th, 2020. We highly encourage you to view the Grow Your Own Grant webinar, look at the RFA program guidelines, your application and the attachments for the pathways which you are going to apply, and reach out as soon as possible with questions. These documents will also provide additional information that will strengthen your proposal. We will conclude this webinar with key dates and timelines for the Grow Your Own Grant Cycle 4. These are also included within the program guidelines and the table shown here. Note, November 5th, 2020, 11:59 p.m. Central Time is the due date for the application in the TEA Document Control Center. November 19th to January 23rd is the competitive review period. Notice of grant approval will be sent out on or before February 23rd, 2021. TEA Teacher Institute for Pathway 1, known as Summer Institute, will be on or around June 28th, 29th, and 30th, 2021, virtually or in person in the Austin area. And the ending date of the grant is June 30th, 2023. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing your applications.